Okay, the channel is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Watching 100 Movies. I am Christiana Ellis,
No, I am Mike Mateen.
and tonight we are wrapping up our 2025 Oscar movie marathon. The awards have been given out. We're going to talk about what won, should it have won, was the ceremony cool, and then we'll talk about the Best Picture winner, Anora. So, I am kicking myself looking at the spreadsheet now and seeing that you saw A Real Pain because I came very close to watching that, but watched a different movie instead. And so now that means that I still need to see it because that's, it's a one that I was interested in regardless, but now it's an Oscar winning movie.
Yes, and I'm definitely want to see The Brutalist. It's just in that weird where it's kind of hard to find in the theater, but it's $20 on streaming.
Hmm.
Where if
That's
I wait a
also,
week or two, it'll be four. Yeah.
yeah, although I will say that movie in particular, I think really benefits from the big screen. So, I mean, if that makes it off the table, then that's one thing. But if that is an opportunity still available, that's definitely the preferred, I think, for that movie. But um, you know, that's how it goes sometimes. If you listen to Hollywood, you should always go to the theater.
Yes, but the time or the ability to do that.
Yes. Well, I watched A Different Man on an airplane, so and it was literally like sitting there looking at the little screen and saying, a real pain or a different man? A real pain, different man. And then I ended
Hmm.
up watching A Different Man, which was good, but also like it just means that I've not seen A Real Pain, and so we can't get into it yet. But do you want we want to just start with kind of how about we start with just like the ceremony itself? What did you think? We had Conan O'Brien hosting this year.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was good. I mean, there was some interesting things. They have done some nice things to kind of speed it up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the unique segments that they kind of to highlight certain things just to kind of splash it up a little bit, I think
Mm-hmm.
were good. And particularly, I liked the Bond tribute, but using, modern artists, not not even and just different artists than who've done
Mm-hmm.
it, right? The songs is an Adele song. Like Adele, not that she was going to be there, but
Mm-hmm. I will
would have got
say
her. Yeah.
the Skyfall bit in particular of that medley, I don't think was my favorite because I
Yeah, I
really
think
like that song, and I don't know that I want to say like Kaya. There was some other artist that I wasn't familiar with before did it, but I kind of like the original version better. She kind of made some choices with her take, which is fine, but I found myself just wishing it was like the real song.
yeah.
um, I will say I thought for like one of the things that was kind of refreshing is just how good the hit rate for the jokes and bits were. I think that for the most part they were all pretty funny, which is
Mhm.
often in the Oscar ceremony you get a couple of good ones and a couple where you're going, all right, okay, are we done with this now? But I felt like they were all pretty successful in this one. I think that the whole idea of instead of showing clips from movies, they were instead having the presenters like talk through like the different performances or something of all the
Mhm.
different categories. I think worked better for some categories than others. Um, I think that when it was actors talking about actors, that felt a little bit weird to me. Um, but talking actors talking about sound and stuff like that, I thought that format worked pretty well. Um,
Yeah, I did
didn't I think broadly speaking, I think that the performances of best original songs is a part of the Oscar ceremony that I like that. Although I think I wasn't. I don't know that I thought that I'm not sure that the 5 songs we had this year were ones that I just was really excited to see performed. So it was fine this year, but I think broadly speaking, I liked that. We got live performances instead of other songs that were not not the best
I
original
thought that was a
songs.
good choice, though. I mean,
Hmm.
because there, it was almost like an acknowledgement that Wicked had some pretty cool songs.
Hmm. Those were the ones that everyone really actually wanted to see performed, but we just, they weren't
Right.
original,
They
so
just,
they, yeah.
right. They just couldn't be nominated. So
Hmm. Hmm.
why not, give the people what they want, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
which is Wicked and
Hmm.
James Bond, even though I guess I've seen that not all the people liked it as much as I did, but
Well, it wa- it f- hmm. I felt like, we've talked about the James Bond movies, like, and my sort of take on them is that broadly speaking, I like them without having ever really thought of myself as like a James Bond fan. Like it's always kind of just like, yeah, those are mostly pretty good. That's kind of usually my like, but certainly there's, just been this long span, but the vibe of it felt a little bit strange to me coming with the ceremony coming right after the headlines about how like Amazon is going to own the Bond rights now and everyone
yeah.
kind of going ew, and then we're wondering like, oh, they're doing a big Bond thing. Um, are they going to announce a casting or something? And then no, oh, okay, all right, we're just talking about we like James Bond. Okay, all right, sure. But it felt like I didn't understand why it was happening, other than just like, hey, we like James Bond and it's a thing to do. Did I miss a specific connection that was supposed to be why they were doing it?
They were honoring like the producers who are been in the news. I don't know if they gave them an actual award,
Hmm.
but
They've been in the news because they're finally giving the rights to Amazon, right?
yeah, but I don't remember exactly what, but they like specifically had like the concept was they were honoring those
Hmm.
producers, and it may have it may have been as vague as just
Hmm.
like, hey, they're stepping away, but they did such a great job with
Yeah.
this, so just honor them versus like a lifetime achievement award or anything, because I don't remember them going
Hmm.
up there.
Yeah.
But
I think
they
they showed
highlighted,
their picture, but that
right?
was it.
Yeah. They showed their picture and they highlighted somebody in the audience. I don't know if it was them or relatives or something like that,
Hmm.
but it was one of those where I wasn't 100% like paying attention at that time because it wasn't like a core part of the ceremony.
Yeah.
And then, yeah,
I think I I know that in some of the like social media that I was participating in while I watched, there were some
hey,
people saying that they really didn't like that segment, which felt to me like an overreaction
yeah,
because for me it was kind of like I said, it's like I don't feel like I completely understand why this is happening, but it's fine. I didn't dislike watching it.
yeah,
Um,
that's kind of where I was at. Like, I thought it was interesting to see a song, and this is one of the ones that got criticized, which is funny because it was probably one of my favorite parts, but like Diamonds Are Forever, right? Like a
mhm.
song from the 60s, done in a very 60s thing, performed by an artist who doesn't sing anything like that. And I think the criticism was like she didn't sound like the original,
Mhm.
so she wasn't on the right key or something like that. And she didn't really like, but she also didn't morph it into her kind of music.
Mhm.
She just showed that she's talented and can do a different thing and do it in a different way. I enjoyed that. A lot of people did not because it
Mhm.
didn't sound like the original because she probably doesn't have the key of
Well,
you know,
they were
'cause
all
she
kind
has a
of,
more grainy, like deeper voice. Like it's just a different
yeah.
performance.
They
Yeah.
were they were kind of all doing like different takes on the songs to the point where it felt like that was a creative decision for the whole medley. It wasn't just individual artists deciding to do it that way.
Correct. What they were doing was basically taking the original, leaving it in the format, right? Like so it's still
Mhm.
the same music, still the same lyrics, cadences, all that stuff, but
Mhm.
then putting it into those artists style key, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people were criticizing it for. Is it's like, oh, she's off key. Well, no, she's on key for herself. She's
Yeah.
just off key from what you're used to, which is the creative decision that they made that I enjoyed.
I didn't have a problem with any of them except the Skyfall one. I didn't. That one felt like it didn't work to me.
Right. And I think that's where what's happening is that some of them didn't work for certain people, and so it sort of became like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, Skyfall one didn't work for me. Well, the Diamonds Forever one didn't work for me. Well, the I can't remember the third one. Didn't work for me. Live and Let Die didn't work for me. And to be fair, they put themselves out there with three of the biggest artists that have ever done these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't remember who did Diamonds Are Forever, but it was, I mean, but anyway, Live and Let Die was, um, um, why can't I think of Paul McCartney, and Skyfall was Adele. I mean, those were those are very unique, very big artists to take a risk modifying to a new artist,
Shirley
right?
Bassey was the original Diamonds Are Forever singer.
Yeah. So again, big and at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're very beloved Bond songs. Like those are three of the most
Mm-hmm.
iconic Bond songs. So I give them and this is part of why I like it and why I keep bringing it up because like I think they took a risk. I think they got some heat for it, but they took the risk, and I thought it was like you said. You enjoyed two out of the three. One just didn't quite work for you. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine, but it was just cool to see something different. And to your point, like with the songs that were in there, like they almost are like admitting that like part of like the one even that won, right? Like El Mal, like that one works because of like the sort of pseudo cabaret in the government like theme to
Yeah.
it. They're not supposed to take that, but that's part of what makes that song work is that it's
Mm-hmm.
like it's this juxtapositioning, but it almost kind of makes sense that like there would be a cabaret and with kind of corrupt governors, and but it's hard to recreate that on a stage, right?
Mm.
It's also two of the songs are in Spanish, so it's again, are you
Yeah.
going to take 10 minutes of your broadcast with Spanish language
Mm-hmm.
singing?
I will
Uh,
say I feel like even of the two songs from Amelia Perez, I like Mi Camino better. But
I don't, but
all
that's those are
right.
personal preferences, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to argue you should or shouldn't. I'm just saying I
Yeah.
really liked El Mal,
Mm.
and part of why I liked it was just Zoe Saldana's like presence in that performance,
Mm-hmm.
you know, um, especially like in a movie where there was so much that was just kind of like, that was part where I really kind of locked in,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought about this a little bit too. Like, also part of what makes that song work so well is the way that the kind of the it's this is what I was trying to put my finger on the last time we talked about this movie with like the language stuff is if you just listen to it purely in Spanish and like you understand like what they're talking about, it's written really well in Spanish, right? Like it's the rhyming sequences and like the juxtapositioning of like what she's saying and like all that. It just kind of fits better than just reading the subtitles, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it made it more powerful. Like I watched it once without any of the subtitles and just kind of like I don't know. I'd have to go back and look because I didn't actually take notes on what it was, but it was like, oh, like that's kind of cool. And like you wouldn't necessarily catch that if you're like trying to watch the subtitles of like kind of how they play on the words. Like there's just some little subtle things that I thought were really cool that made me
Hmm.
like it a lot. So anyway,
All right.
but
The one other thing that I kind of had a note about was that the music that they played during the in memoriam segment was a real change up from how they've done it before, right? Having it be the classical, it was Mozart piece, I believe. Um,
but I know what you're saying. I don't
yeah,
remember what
but having
it was.
it be the classical sort of like heightened sort of tone as opposed to more like a sad ballad, which is more typically what they've done in the past, was like I was like I never had a problem with it, but when it first started, it took me a little while to just kind of get over how different a choice it was. But certainly, like, lost a lot of folks this year, and like, not to get too into it, but like there's new news just today about Gene Hackman and like how that all happened, which is a bizarre story.
But
Yeah, let's
that
not get into it, but
no,
sure.
no.
Yeah.
But that point of like Gene Hackman and some of the other people in there, and
Hmm.
I don't
David
know that
Lynch.
yeah, has that much to do with it, but it was something that like it was this is one of the I'm sure it's kind of been building for a couple of years, but one of the first times where it's like our generation is now seeing people like usually when when we would see people in the in memoriam, it would be either, oh, that's sad but that was an old person,
Mm,
or that's a very young person, that's kind of tragic.
yeah.
We're starting to enter the, oh,
People that weren't that old when we were coming up learning the movies are
right.
now,
And now it's like, no, but they're actually in an age where that is when these people are going to start passing away.
hmm
And there's just a sort of a different reconciliation with that. And so again, I don't know that they tied this to that.
mm,
I recognized that difference in me watching it and the difference in the song. And I wondered, are they changing that tone because like that sad ballad worked more for like boomers
hmm,
and maybe it doesn't work for Gen X and next, and they don't necessarily know what, and so they just go to a classical. Just
hmm
sort of a weird speculation I had based on
yeah.
nothing except one feeling.
Well, you might be right. Or maybe it could have also just been looking for something to change it up too.
Yeah,
Um, in any case, I thought it was actually pretty effective and made really good use of that really cool stage that they had.
yeah,
It was a good stage, and it was neat design with like the orchestra like in the middle, and it can kind of open up and or be one big screen, and that was kind of it was a neat design.
yes.
Um, okay, so do we want to just go through the winners, touching on each, maybe from bottom to top on our spreadsheet?
That sounds really good.
Obviously, we'll save the detailed discussion of Honora for when we get to the end there. But certainly, we'll pass that name a couple of times on our way up to there. But so starting off at the bottom of our list was the best film editing, which did go to Honora. And so let's just go ahead and skip all discussion of Honora until we come back around to it, because we're going to talk a lot more about it.
Yes.
Uh,
I
hmm?
honestly like as far as like deserving to win, like of the 4 out of the 5 that I saw, like they were all done really well. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know that Perez in particular was, but so it's fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have any strong opinion. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it was a strong category this year. Although, like again, we talked a lot about Emilia Perez. I think it does some things well and some things interesting, but it's just like does not all come together. Um, so we can maybe combine best sound and best visual effects, which both went to Dune Part Two, and is not the first time in Oscar history that the most notable big special effects blockbuster that gets a lot of nominations ends up only winning sound and visual effects.
yes,
That has happened before, and it will happen again.
correct.
Hmm. I think that there are some other categories that I think Dune Two was certainly competitive in. But these are the ones where um, you almost feel bad for the other movies in the category, just because, not that Dune Part 2 wasn't stellar in those categories, but it almost feels like Dune's going to win those to make up for not winning the other ones that it's nominated for.
Right. And the unfortunate thing for me is, I kind of look at this grouping and even up into the next main one is it felt like Wicked was like second place in every one of these.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like it had really obviously really good sound.
Yeah.
I thought the visual effects were cool, like the way that
Hmm.
they and I think they are important in that movie because they changed they took a play and made it into a movie and they changed the viewing thing. And it wasn't just, I mean, we've talked about
Hmm.
like being able to see the close-ups and all that was part of it, but so
Yeah.
was the set design,
Well, I was
which
just
is
going to
part of
say,
visual effect.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think that is owed more to the production design than to the effects specifically. But the effects, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of effects work going on for sure.
Yeah, and those two are so intricately tied together in
Hmm.
that one, right? Because the production design, a lot of it is effect, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but anyway, it just kind of felt like not that Wicked should have won any of these, but it's just like it was a
Hmm.
really good movie and
Yeah.
it just lost out because these categories were very strong,
Yep.
you know?
Yep. So for best documentary feature, despite my well-meaning promise, I did not manage to see any of them. And so, did not manage. I shouldn't try to save face there by implying that I tried really hard and then was unsuccessful. It's more just like, it was just hard enough that I did not manage to get there. But it is interesting though. No Other Land won, just because in some circles that was a controversial film about the Israeli and Palestinian dispute, with filmmakers from both sides of that dispute trying to find a way through and giving a impassioned speech about it that I thought was great, but certainly produced some headlines in certain circles.
Yes.
I haven't seen the movie, so I can't comment on that, but I liked the speech they gave.
Yeah, and the speech they gave had I like reflected a little bit on like why we're having so much trouble seeing the documentaries now.
Hmm.
And I feel like they are less accessible than they have been in the past, like in the last couple of years.
Hmm.
It's like they're leaning way more into like things that just have to have like, sort of like it's almost like they're not all like this huge message, but they aren't the documentaries that are well produced that are accessible. They are these more either niche or political or just very rhetorical documentaries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's not so much of the documentary of like we're documenting something. Yeah, there's always some rhetoric in a documentary, like a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just part of the what you're signing up for. But these just feel like they're leaning a little more. And again, I just have these weird speculations that kind of go through my head of like, well, as they're getting more mainstream and trying to be like less, political for lack of a better word or woke or whatever in all their other categories, like is this the one they're kind of like going the other way to
Hmm.
like, hold on to that a little? I don't know. It was just kind of a weird thought. So
Yeah. Well, certainly one of the reasons it's hard to see No Other Land right now is because they literally haven't been able to get international distribution. So, um,
yeah.
but hopefully they will now. But so moving along, we have Best Makeup and Hairstyling next, which I feel like the Substance won, and how could anyone argue that it shouldn't win in that category?
Exactly. I agree. And
Hmm.
again, it's one of those ones where I haven't seen A Different Man or
Hmm.
Nosferatu. It felt like, you
Those
know,
are both movies where the makeup matters and it is done very well. But I mean, the Substance this year is just like,
yeah,
yeah.
100%. Like
Hmm.
I've
Hmm.
only seen Wicked and Amelia Perez, and like Wicked, the makeup very much does matter
Hmm.
because it can't detract. I mean, our heroine is green, right? Like,
Hmm.
and it can't just look like a person in green makeup because of the close-ups and the singing and all the things that you don't have on the stage. Like that, it was pretty well done. But you're right, can't argue with the substance. Like they literally created some pretty crazy things through.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was one of many people suggesting on social media that it would have that they should have let Monstro Ilisasu give us give a speech for the award. Which this is the credits sequence name for the final form in the substance.
Mm.
But in any case, I think a well deserved win there. Um, Speaking of Wicked, though, costume design. Costume design went to Wicked. I really liked the whole bit they did for that one, where like they had people from each of the movies come out, and but Bowen Yang from Wicked was the only one who's actually in the outfit, and the whole joke about like, guys, I thought we were all doing the thing. I mean, it's a pretty old joke format for this kind of show, but it worked. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, there were some great costumes in Wicked for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it was well deserved and
mhm.
also a strong category though. I mean,
Yeah. hmm I think that one of the things I was thinking was I think in my heart, if it was going to go to something other than Wicked, it would have been Conclave. But I
yeah.
did have some dilemma in my heart just because, although they look great in that movie, it's like, but aren't those all real outfits though? Like, isn't that what people actually wear? Like, I mean, maybe it's more complicated than that. I'm sure it is. Maybe it would be relevant to like highlight how much research had to go into it, right? But yeah, boy, they did look great in that movie.
Yeah, and whether or not that there are modifications made to them to make them more functional for the shooting of the movie to make it, that's what I was kind of thinking is like,
hmm
are they in the actual like robes, or did they find something that looks like that so that when they do some of the things that are in the movie, not that there's a ton of action, but just like hurrying places and things like that, that it maintains that regal beauty, whereas the actual heavy, thick robe may kind of not look like that. Like you may look like you're shuffling.
hmm
I again, I just had a lot of weird
Yeah.
random thoughts on this stuff
Sure.
sharing in our podcast.
Entirely fitting.
Yeah.
Um, Fitting. Haha. I'm going to pretend I did that on purpose. Talking about costumes and fitting. Anyway, best cinematography went to The Brutalist. I think this was a strong category this year. Although again, Emilia Perez is in there, and it's like I mean, I think Emilia Perez did some things well, but I didn't think that the cinematography was especially good.
No, and I think part of that, you and I are probably feeling the same thing, is that it may have been good cinematography, but the choices that they made were not like how they were trying to make the movie look. I don't
hmm
necessarily think was that impressive.
Also, just out of the Best Picture nominees, I don't think that that was even in the top five of those movies. Like, I mean, it's just like I don't think it was bad, but it wasn't standout. I don't think it was part of anyone feeling like that was the thing with that movie. It was kind of dark a lot of the time, honestly.
That's what
Um,
I'm saying is like I think that they may have been talented cinematographers, but they made a directional choice that I don't agree with,
yeah.
you know, and that's the darkness and like
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and trying
Yeah.
to make like like where it works is in again like in like the El Mal performance, and there's one of the other songs where it's like it's dark, but then there's almost this like
Mm-hmm.
spotlight, but it doesn't look like a real spotlight. Like that's probably takes a lot of talent,
Mm,
but it's not necessarily like what I want to watch for 2 hours, right? I
right.
don't know. So
I think the real snub in this category is Nickel Boys, where the really
mm,
striking use of the first person camera is central to the movie and it does some really remarkable things with it, and yet why is that one not nominated here? Anyway, but The Brutalist has very good cinematography. It's striking. I think it's a deserving win. It's one of the reasons that I kind of saying is like, if you can get a chance to see The Brutalist on the big screen, it's a better experience. Not that it would be bad otherwise, but it's just, that's part of what's really powerful in that movie.
Yeah, and just from clips I've seen, I can see that. So
Hmm.
hey, hey,
Uh, so next is production design, which we were talking about the production design in Wicked, and sure enough, lots of people thought it had good production design because it won in a very difficult category, like up against Dune Part Two, Conclave, The Brutalist, and Nosferatu. Like all of those are just really dramatic production design movies,
yeah,
and for it to win, I mean, they had to it had to feel like it could have existed in the same world as The Wizard of Oz, but be more elaborate and lush and visually interesting in a more modern sensibility. So many different little things they had to invent, and things that like they maybe wouldn't have had to invent because it could have just been an ordinary sort of version of whatever it is, you know? Does every single bookshelf have to be some weird bookshelf, or can it just be a regular bookshelf, right? Well, in
yeah,
Wicked, pretty much everything is some weird bookshelf.
yeah, and I mean, there's a number of scenes that you can talk about with this. Like, I mean, the train platform is good. The
Mhm.
arrival at school is pretty amazing.
Mhm.
But man, the song where they're dancing in the wheels or whatever those things are, like the
The rotating shelves, right? It
yeah,
was
the
the
rotating
Cthulhu.
bookshelves. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bookshelves. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That, I mean, right there, like that, it wins for that, right?
Mhm.
Like,
It's a great sequence. I think of the various staging numbers, like just talking about like how the song is staged, I think that's my favorite in the movie.
I agree.
Yeah. Um, all right. So, best original song. We touched on this one a little bit. El Mal won. I personally, of the two, liked Mi Camino more, but I can acknowledge those are both good songs in a movie that I otherwise didn't like. I feel like I have to mention that every time, apparently. Um, but let's go, since we kind of talked about that already, let's go to
Move on.
best original score. Or did you have something else you wanted to?
No, I was
Okay.
going to say let's move on. Yeah,
All
I
right,
think we've
best
we've hit
original
that.
score. In my vacation at a writing retreat, was listening to a lot of music while trying to write stuff, and I went through all of these scores there, with the exception that for Wicked, I could not find what parts of the music were supposed to be the original parts that it was nominated for. I kept finding scores that were just the songs that are not original. So I so I can't really comment specifically on what specific new music counted here. I did discover that part of the reason the Challengers score wasn't nominated is because parts of it were actually not original beats. Like they took and remixed a bunch of kind of techno music to make the score, which is fantastic, but I guess didn't quite meet the originality criteria. Um, it's an incredible score, but I guess that's part of why it wouldn't not be nominated. Also, apparently, Luca Guadagnino, who is the director of Challengers, also did Queer last year, and apparently he was all in campaigning for Queer and not Challengers, which is maybe why Challengers didn't get nominated for anything, and yet Queer didn't either. So I feel like if he had pushed for Challengers, maybe whatever. But in any case, the score for The Brutalist is really good. It's really striking. Um, it's, I mean, even just the bit that they would play when The Brutalist won something, ba 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 ba, that sort of whole bit. It's great music in there. Um, Also, the Wild Robot score is great if you like the score for Wally, because it's very similar to the score for Wally, which is also good. It's not, it doesn't make it bad, but I just was listening to it and saying, I feel like you could do a track shuffle with this in the score to Wally and have trouble remembering which one is from which movie. Um, which I mean, again, it's kind of fitting. Like you can see there's some overlap there.
Yep.
Did you have any thoughts on the score?
Not really. I mean, I I thought the score was one of the best parts of Conclave. Like not, I mean, it was.
Hmm?
I thought Conclave, like I know we talked a lot about the story decision, but like the construction of the movie is pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And score, costume, editing, cinematography, like all of these like core, you know, movie making categories, I felt like it was so strong in.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
I just haven't seen The Brutalist, so I can't
Mm-hmm.
compare it to them, you
Yeah.
know. But that would really be the only thing I
I
would
mean,
say.
I was a huge fan of Conclave too. I mean, just based on our discussion, I feel like I liked it more than you did. Um, I would have been happy seeing Conclave win, honestly, Best Picture. Although I loved Honora as well, as we'll get into. Um, so moving along for Best International Feature Film, that went to I'm Still Here from Brazil, which I'm kind of glad of, just because that's a great movie and it wasn't really going to win anything else. So you know, um, and so yeah, um, we can go ahead and keep moving.
Yeah, I have no comment on that other than
Sure.
I saw Flow and I liked it, and I
Yeah.
saw Amelia Rose and I didn't, and that's
Hmm.
it.
Well, and we're going to talk more about Flow in a minute anyway. So for best adapted screenplay, it went to Conclave. Um, there were a lot of categories this year where I sort of feel like there's four great movies there, and then Amelia Perez in a lot of these categories. But Conclave, I think, we can and have debated the merits of that final sort of reveal right at the end. But boy, everything leading up to it is impeccable, regardless of how you might feel about that one particular decision at the end.
Correct. It was still, well, I mean, I only saw two of these, so it
Mm.
was my favorite because it was better than Amelia Perez, but I am happy with it winning this.
Mm-hmm.
I I think it was more like, and the ending part, like it disappointed me on what I felt like was otherwise such a tight movie that it's just like why did you go for that? Like why did you
I
do it
mean,
that, you know? And
it's because they're trying to, there's the whole theme running through of like the women are excluded, except that everyone knows that they're actually really there and helping, and they're just only pretending that they're not doing anything, and then you try to have someone who's going to force that conversation.
yeah, no, I get it, and I've
Mm.
softened on it, um, and
But
kind of
like I can certainly understand there is still that visceral reaction right up at the beginning of just like, wait, that's what's happening.
right, like I just really enjoyed myself for 1 hour and 59 minutes, and then
Mm-hmm.
like you in this last minute you spun this thing up, and and but I wouldn't take, to your point, I wouldn't take the screenplay away for that decision
Mm-hmm.
because the screenplay is bigger than that. And I think the rest of what it does and what it's trying to say, and you know I I think it really hits a lot of things in a really good way. Like to your whole point, all the stuff you were talking about and how and sort of the explanation of why the ending sort of like takes that to the next level. But like all of those things that were in there about the women and that piece of it and the crisis of the church and the way that it masterfully like does doesn't ignore the biggest crisis the church has ever had, but like doesn't make it the central thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's just kind of mentioned as like, here's this thing that yes, we dealt with and we continue to deal with, but like we're trying to move on from that, and that's also causing us a crisis of faith. And you know and anytime I read any of the articles that come across as this is like an anti-Catholic film, like I think that is absolute nonsense, right? Like this movie hits the right tone, and that, yeah, if you
Mhm.
want to look at it with that lens and that's what you're going into it believing it's going to be, like I guess you could take that from it.
Where
But
I could see people say that is only if they're more like on the Tedesco continuum as Catholics. You know what I mean? Like, because the movie very much has an opinion on which side of that particular divide it's on.
yes, but I feel like it's very like it's not. I guess like to your point about the Tedesco thing, it could be. I guess if you're very very into like Catholicism and like the all the pieces that go with that, you could see it that way. But
Hmm.
as just a, you know, if you take anti-Catholic versus anti-religion, like it's definitely more on the Catholic than the religion. Like there's nothing in there that questions religion or being religious, right? Like, and I feel like that is actually more difficult to do when I kind of thought back on it, like to question the manner in which they organize this particular part of the religion versus taking a shot at the religion itself
Hmm.
is hard, right? Like to kind of walk that line, and that's so these are the reasons why I think that it was really well written,
Oh
even if
yeah,
I
a hundred
agree with
percent.
a
I
writing choice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agree
yeah,
completely. Conclave
yeah,
is a great movie. Good
yeah.
screenplay.
All
All
right.
right. So for best original screenplay, the winner was Honora, which we're going to talk more about. I was surprised that it won this, but not unhappy. I just wouldn't have guessed that that's what the but it ended up being kind of just part of a like a mini sweep for Honora. Really, I think just people loved it so much they kind of wanted to give it lots of stuff. I mean,
Yes,
Honora won 5 out of the 6 things it was nominated for. So
yes, I agree with that. I ran into, so I don't go on Twitter or X, whatever you call it, very often.
hmm.
But sometimes when I do actively want to see like timely reactions to things that I am interested in, like so
Hmm.
sometimes after sporting events, this, what happened on Tuesday, um, like I'll go in there and just kind of see what are some of the things that are being said, right? And
Hmm.
so after the Academy Awards, I went in there and I ran into this weird rabbit hole, as tends to happen, of this argument about how it was like and again, it's like a Twitter thing. How much of an offense it was that A Real Pain didn't win to such a like rudimentarily written movie like Anora. And people were taking like screenshots of like the scripts, and they were taking like these super
Uh,
complex like
yeah,
monologues out of A Real Pain, and like the super like the ending scene, right, out of Anora, where the
yeah.
whole
Well,
power of the scene is their in their like acknowledgement of each other without the words,
yeah.
right?
Like
And there's
it's
you
I
know
like so I will definitely say I think I love the script for Honora. I think it is a fantastic script. I do think it kind of I think the fact that people just had so much goodwill for it that they wanted it to win lots of things probably helped it in this category. But that doesn't mean that I haven't seen a real pain, so I can't directly compare the two. But
it
but
it's very
yeah,
interesting, like Jesse Eisenberg running a kind of,
I mean I'm familiar with the premise. I've
yeah,
seen
but
the
it's like but like I was gonna say it a different way of like it's basically like him running a visual journal of if he was truly in this situation, like kind of how he would feel, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of that, and it's
Mhm.
fine, but it leads to very effuse dialogue, right? And if
Yeah.
that's all, and so yes, if you're comparing or if you're saying original screenplay was this the most eloquent and effuse dialogue, well, no, it's not going to be Anora, but was
Well,
this?
I
Yeah.
anytime someone has decided to cherry pick individual pages from the screenplay, I think you can safely just disregard their opinion.
Yes, and I did,
Yeah.
and I proceeded along.
Incidentally, Blue Sky, way better than, what used to be Twitter. I'm not trying to just not say X, but the point just being X sucks. It has for a long time, I think. But Blue Sky has its problems, but is a lot better in the specific ways that X sucks. So you can all decide for yourselves how much you agree with that take.
Perfect.
All right. Let's jump forward into Best Supporting Actress. I love Zoe Saldana. I'm not sorry to see her win an Oscar, but I don't know that I necessarily thought that she was the best in this category this year, but also she's the lead of that movie. How do they possibly justify that she is the supporting actress in that movie?
Because they're putting
Yeah, Carla, yeah, Sophia Gascon in that, but I think that is egregious category fraud. That's just not what that movie is. Zoe Saldana is in the whole movie, and Carla is in 60% of the movie.
yes, uh, and you could make not exactly the same case for Ariana Grande, but I mean
Mm,
she is in 50% of the movie or whatever.
mm,
Whatever. Not, she almost shares screen time
yeah,
with, and I would have loved to see her win if that's what they were gonna do.
I kind
I
of
think
yeah it was yeah.
Rossellini from like the concept of it truly being a supporting
Hmm.
role. I thought that's who should have won.
Yeah. I like Zoe Saldana a lot. I don't think she's bad in the movie. I think I would have put her fifth out of five in this category, personally.
Really.
Yeah. But that's me. And it's related to me not liking the movie. So,
Fair enough. And
yeah.
I probably give her some rear view credit
Hmm.
because I really liked her speech.
Yeah. I did like her speech.
So does that mean that she should have won? No, but I'm
Yeah.
fine with her winning because I
Yeah.
thought it was a great speech.
I I'm just sort of like doubly mad because I didn't like the movie, but also because how is she not the lead of the movie? It's just stupid. Anyway, I mean obviously the producers get to decide which category they submit people in, and yet sometimes it just feels silly. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
But I do want to touch on her speech a little bit because it's a little more important to me because like it's something that like I've been trying to kind of going through like and kind of reflecting on like as I'm about to have a daughter and like all this kind of stuff of just like heritage and things like that. And like
Hmm.
it is weird, like, because, and again, anybody sitting here who doesn't know who I am is not going to know this. Like, I am the child of immigrants. Like, and it's a weird place to be when you are the child of immigrants and no one ever sees you like that, right? And I understand like there are some hardships that come with always being seen like that
Hmm.
that I've been very fortuitous to like not have to deal with, but that causes also like there's a lot to think about with that of like how fortunate I was that like I don't just look like an immigrant and things that I didn't have to deal with and things that people say in rooms that maybe they wouldn't if they knew there was an immigrant there.
Hmm.
And like it's just sort of a thing that I've been going through. So to hear her kind of like be so proud of like being the first, child of Dominican immigrants to win the award and like how that what that meant to her,
Hmm.
like that hits me different, you
Yeah.
know. So I was really happy to see that because
Good. Yeah.
it's kind of timely as
Hmm.
like I said, something I'm sort of thinking about a lot.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine, like what possibly in the world right now might have you thinking about these things.
I
But
kind of left that part out and just went with I'm
yeah,
having a
okay,
daughter and
fair
thinking
enough.
about
Fair
heritage.
enough.
But you're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it does just dovetail too, where I kind of commented on one of our previous updates that I was just trying to figure out, like, she didn't always spell her name with the Enye, or at least in like movie credits, right? And so I was just not sure when that had changed specifically, but I did see an article more recently where apparently it really just was a thing when she first started in Hollywood. Her first manager said, you know,
Don't do
don't do it, and because people, you'll see more foreign. You should just do it without. And then she has reclaimed that. So good for her.
Yeah, I mean, and this is also like, yeah, as we're sort of getting into this, like it's also part of, I mean, we love the name that we chose for our daughter, which I'm not going to go to until we actually have her, but
Mm-hmm.
it is a name that can go both ways, right? Like it's a masculine or feminine name. And we chose the name not because of that, but like my wife has also mentioned, like she's not sad that, it might help her on resumes in the future. And
Hmm.
it's just like weird that like to think that that's like still a thing like that there can still be some unconscious bias
Yep.
that like if someone's not sure, they're just going to look at the background, and it's like, gosh, what? Like I would have never thought of that. And the fact that she thinks that again, not that it's a huge thing, but like that it could be a thing, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just thinking about those kind of things, yeah, has been kind of timely.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, uh, best supporting actor went to Kieran Culkin for A Real Pain. I love him. I haven't seen the movie. From all accounts, he's really good in it. Um,
I, yeah, I think that he was really, really good in this.
mm-hmm.
I think that I'm not saying the movie wouldn't be nominated for all the things that it was if it wasn't for his performance, but it
Mm-hmm.
certainly is. I don't want to say underwhelming because it wasn't that, but it didn't blow me away.
Mm-hmm.
It
I've
was fine.
I've heard some speculation that part of what's going on here is people also kind of want to reward him for Succession, even
Yeah,
though he already got the Emmy for that.
yeah,
Um,
as he noted in his
yes.
acceptance speech,
Um,
he was very good, and
yeah, I think
he
he's great.
drives
Yeah.
he makes the movie different
Hmm.
than what the movie would have been had he not delivered this performance.
Yeah.
Like the same things could have happened and it would have been a fine movie.
Hmm.
Him kind of bringing this energy that's just like a little off to what everybody else is going through, but yet he's still going through the same things
Hmm.
is and even on like, but he's dealing the real pain he's dealing with. Just I don't think this is a huge spoiler. Like it's the pain of like going and revisiting like their families travel through the Holocaust, or their grandmothers like travel through the Holocaust, and then his travel through mental health,
Hmm.
and like showing that like it's not trying to draw this direct connection that like mental health is as bad as the Holocaust, but it's like showing that these things are complicated,
Yeah.
right? And that pain and fear and unknowing of like what your next day is going to bring you, of like it again, it's much more subtle about this, but he's the one that brings that element to the movie,
Hmm.
right? Of his performance. Otherwise they would have had to be explicit and then it would have been kind of weird, you know. So I think he was great.
Yeah. I will say the rest of this category, I didn't see The Apprentice, but Guy Pearce is incredible in The Brutalist. Edward Norton was as Pete Seeger was my favorite part of A Complete Unknown. He's wonderful. And then Yura Borisov is the only Honora nomination that didn't win. He's also great. Although it was interesting just because knowing that he was nominated before I sat down to watch the movie, I spent a long time of the movie saying like, when does this guy show up?
Yeah, and that's why like I kind of took away from his is like you hate to ever like categorize something like this, but this is
Mhm.
kind of feels like one of those ones where it's like being nominated is kind of the win,
It
right?
is,
Like
yeah. I
it's
think.
the acknowledgement that you performed such a critical piece in this movie
Hmm.
that you get to be on the podium,
Yeah.
you know.
It really elevated what could have been a much sort of smaller, less impactful role. There's no question this guy's going to get more work. And good because he should.
Yep.
All right. For Best Actress, the winner, speaking of gender neutral names, Mikey Madison for Honora. And I did not predict that she was going to win, but I did smile when she did.
100% same reaction. This was my favorite. She was my favorite part of Honora.
Mm-hmm. Oh, she's great. I mean, the movie's named after her for a reason, right? Like she's just as this character is just such a great full person that you can root for even when it's obvious she's making a bad decision. And you just I love her. And also it's just like when you see some interviews with her, it's like she's not just playing herself. It's not one of those roles where they just cast someone who's just like that. She's a little more of a soft spoken, thoughtful person in interviews and so on, as opposed to just the the I don't know what's the Jersey Shore
Yeah.
type. But yes, she's wonderful in Honora, which we'll talk more about in a moment. I think a lot of people were predicting that Demi Moore was going to win for The Substance. I wouldn't. I wasn't. I think I was still in a little bit of shock that The Substance got as many nominations as it did because I loved it, but it's just such a movie that usually doesn't get that kind of recognition. So I think maybe I was skeptical that she would win for that reason. Um, but yeah, so I went to Honora. Best Actor, Adrian Brody for The Brutalist. And I think this was a very strong category as well. But, Adrian Brody is just fantastic in The Brutalist. And his speech at the Oscars was almost as long.
This speech did not, as like if we're rating them based in hindsight based on their speeches, like this would have knocked him down a few from because it wasn't bad. It was long.
Yeah.
He got an argument with them about how he was about to wrap up and then
Yeah.
went on for longer than he had been
Yeah.
going on. Like that was
Well,
it was rough,
and it felt like I felt like I was watching him in real time, realizing that he was losing control of the situation.
That's
And I don't
great.
just mean
Yeah.
like the music coming on. I mean like his ability to go up there and say what he wanted to say was getting away from him, and it felt like watching him realize that was happening.
That's a much more eloquent way to put what one of the local radio stations here did on their morning show, which they were doing their Oscar highlights. And they said, okay, Adrian Brody's speech was X number of minutes long. So we can't play the whole thing for you here because we don't do segments that long at all. So we're gonna play the highlights. And what they had done is cut every filler word. So it was just this whole thing of like, um, it's nice to win, but because he what you're talking about is him like losing control, and then the filler words he was using as he tried to regain, they
Mm-hmm.
just cut all that into like a 30-second clip.
Yeah.
And
It
it
was
was
like
brutal.
I would say it's not as bad as Will Smith following up his Best Actor win by slapping Chris Rock, but it is one of the more embarrassing Oscar performances I can think of.
Yeah.
Um, I feel bad for him because it just felt like he got flustered early on in the speech and just really never recovered. And like by the end, you could see he was it felt like I want to be the guy who says the really important like political thing that everybody agrees with at the same time that everybody thinks of, and but I didn't actually plan what it was that I should say, and I'm trying to think of it on the fly, and oh God, everybody's already mad at me, and I honestly felt like in improv, one of the things they teach you starting in 101 is how to edit a scene. Because when you are in the middle of an improv scene and it's not going well, it's so bad. It's torture for everybody. And so, one of the most generous things a teammate can do for you in that instance is to edit the scene. They just run across the stage saying, okay, that scene's over. We're doing something else now. And unfortunately, this was not a scenario where someone could just save him from himself. The
I mean,
music tried and
orchestra
he didn't.
tried.
Yeah. So, in any case, I think he's fantastic in The Brutalist. I think it's a deserving win. Um, I think that if he gets nominated again in the future, he should write something um, and not try to do off the cuff. Um, moving on, we only got left. Let's jump to best animated feature, which went to Flow. I think it was a little bit of a surprise because a lot of people I think expected Inside Out 2 to win. Inside Out 2, great as we discussed, but Flow also great and kind of cool that such a like a plucky little like one man shop from Latvia managed to put together such a great movie and have that get rewarded. I thought that was nice.
Yeah, I definitely smiled a little when this
Mm-hmm.
happened. So
Yeah. Um,
as much as I like Inside Out too,
mhm.
it's nice that they got it. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like those were the two in my heart that I was like, it should be one of those two. Um, but yeah, and so then the only categories we hadn't talked about yet were best director and then best picture. Best director for Sean Baker in Anora, and then best picture, Anora. And I think it became clear about halfway through the evening that Anora, which had already been kind of a rumored frontrunner, is like, okay, once Sean Baker's up there the second time, we're like, okay, I think yeah, this is what's going to happen now.
Yep.
But you know, honestly, good. I thought Anora was great. It's it's smaller in some ways than some of the other movies in the sense that it doesn't necessarily try to be about too much, even as it can touch on lots of things. It's willing to still tell a small story that is mostly just about this small group of people without necessarily always having to make all of it into a metaphor for something bigger. But at the same time, the characters they chose to tell a story about touch on all of these other things. So it
Yep.
all becomes part of the flavor. Um, so I think now that we can really get into it, I'll just sort of reiterate that kind of what I had said about it was I sort of gave the initial, like, here's what the very beginning stuff is, you know. So, you know, Honora is an exotic dancer slash sex worker. There's this charming young guy from Russia that wants to pay her to be his live-in girlfriend. Things develop from there, but then it gets to a point where you just lose any ability to predict what's going to happen next. I think we're going to go full spoilers into Anora now, but what did you think of Anora?
So I enjoyed Anora when I
Mm-hmm.
watched it. I when I first kind of finished it, which was very close to the ceremony, it was that weekend at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, I mean, compared to like what I've seen on there, I mean, I'm fine with this being best picture. I'm not saying that this is the best picture I watched this year. I would have still thought Wicked based on what I had seen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as I kind of, and I think it's also why I kind of reflect back on like how good whatever his name is, the Russian supporting actor is.
Well, so yeah, you're Yuri
R-
Borisov.
Yura Borisov, how important he is to that, because
Mm.
in my reflections back, because it kind of ends, it doesn't end sad, it ends
It's there's
awkwardly.
yeah, there's some bittersweet in there, but even still, it's like it's like life goes on more than sad.
Right. And and the power of the scene, which again, we're full spoiler here,
Mm-hmm.
of where he does this really sweet thing for her in the way that he knows how to do it, right? Like he steals her wedding ring back
Mm-hmm.
from the rich family, the rich Russian family, who don't even realize that this
Yeah.
thing, Vanya's not gonna say anything. He doesn't gonna worry about it. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
sort of on his thing, which is like this other piece that I'll get to on my reflection, and gives it back to her because like she's being paid off to divorce him, you
Mm-hmm.
know, cut off from all of this. And the only thing that this guy knows how to do to like show that he's has empathy for her,
Mm-hmm.
to like, because she keeps making this deal about like, where the F's my wedding ring, like blah blah blah,
Mm-hmm.
like that's mine. And he gets it for her and hands it to her. And her initial instinct is, it's unclear if whether she was just going to like give him a dance or like have sex with him, but that's where she goes to. And he's like, he thinks that's what he wanted to. Like, that's not why he did it, but he thinks
Mm-hmm.
he's in that. But there's just like, they're both different now.
Mm-hmm.
And this doesn't have to be how you have to do things anymore. And her realization that he's not going to force that on her,
Mm-hmm.
and she doesn't need to do that anymore, and like the agency that she sort of creates in that situation, or had created, that she realizes in that situation, because of all of her like standing up to what she thought was what she wanted, which was to be married to him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really the fact that she was standing up for herself. And that, like, I didn't see any of that when I first watched it. It was sort of like you're waiting for Vanya to realize like how much of a pussy he is, and like stand up to his parents and come get her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what you think's going to happen. And then when it ends, you're just like, well, that's weird. Like she got nothing and all this. And then like on reflection, it's like, no, she got everything, because and it's not even like, and you start to think like, it's not even that she felt like after a week that they needed to be married. It That's what's showing in the movie, but the
It
reality of
was
it is,
Cinderella.
right, she's standing up
Yeah.
for herself though.
Oh,
That's the
but yeah,
weird,
at the end, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
is that her fighting to stay married to him wasn't necessarily about she wanted to be married to him when it all comes down. It's about that she stood up for something.
She wanted to be treated like a person.
Right.
Yeah, and
It
yeah, and
Yeah, so it all, when that all sort of that kind of clicked into place, and I
mm-hmm.
went back, because the beginning of the movie is like, it's purposely kind of odd, and then there's a lot of very like the way they build their relationship is very strange, because it's
Mm-hmm.
very like non-romantic sex,
Well,
and there's a
yeah.
lot of that.
I mean, so I kind
But
of
yet then they
described it.
kind of like each other. Yeah.
Well, I
Go
kind of
ahead. Yeah.
described it as dramatic irony in the sense that one of the first conversations we see her have in the club is talking about her love of Disney princesses and especially Cinderella, right? And so then when there's this handsome prince who's basically making an offer, look at I'm rich, I can give you anything I want, I also really like you, I'm kind of charming and funny, and hey, I want to marry you and you can help me also not have to go back to Russia. And it feels like a Cinderella scenario, and I think even at the same time that we can see her recognizing this might be a bad idea, but could I live with myself being presented with a possible Cinderella scenario and not going for it? Right? And so she does, but I feel like we in the audience are supposed to understand, even when that's happening, this is a bad idea. this is not going to have a fairy tale ending, or at least that's how I perceived it. Was that kind of your feeling, or were you
No,
more
I
expecting that was
actually
going to
I
work
thought it
out?
was going to be more on the Cinderella end of it, and that like even though it was impulsive
Mm-hmm.
of Vanya to do all of this,
Mm-hmm.
that he would also grow as a person. Like that was
Mm-hmm.
where I thought it
Well,
was gonna
yeah.
that he would learn to stand up to his parents, that it would either end in like he stands up to them and like they whatever, or like he loses like his inheritance, but yet they stay together. Like I didn't really know what it was gonna do, but that's where I
Mm-hmm.
kind of thought it was going. So
Yeah.
when it completely went the other way of that he went back to just being an immature rich kid
Mm-hmm.
and she grew out of it, it took me a couple of days to be like, oh, I get what that I get what it was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. This really was a movie that kind of I found myself I kept thinking about it more than
Yes.
most of the others, where it's like it's one thing to watch a movie and come out on the other side and say, "Wow, that was great." But then you don't really keep thinking about it. This was definitely one where I just kept thinking about it. All the little pieces of it, and how in the first half you get this really cool symmetry of the first half of her like in love with this guy, and he wasn't nominated, but Mark Edelstein as Vanya is, wow, what a find this kid is, huh? Like
Yeah.
he's also great at being like the perfect guy to assuage any of the other obvious red flags there would be in that situation. um, but yeah, he's so charming. He's got all of these friends we're meeting. They're hanging out. They're doing fun stuff. They have chemistry together, and like all of the things that they do in that sequence. Even though you get a couple little touches where, like when they go to the Vegas hotel and he starts chewing out the manager, and the manager's getting all freaked out. He says, "Oh no, just kidding," and you're kind of like, I don't think the hotel guy thought that was funny. But those are all just like that's the salt in the sugar, so to speak.
And
Uh,
those are the things where I was thinking like, oh, this is what he's growing out of. That's
yeah,
what the movie would show us is
sure.
like, but that's
Well,
also
I
me
think
coming
it's
at it from a
certainly the
very
hope, right? Like I think I obviously I think they're both valid interpretations of that first part of the movie, but I think you were finding yourself very just much in Annie's perspective of hoping that that's true, right? Like you can see those little things, but you're hoping that what, this can be the Cinderella scenario. Let's
well,
make
yeah,
it that.
there's 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 that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also, and I don't mean this in like a negative way of like I'm not going to apologize for having a male centric like view of the movie. That
Oh,
is
that's fun.
how I watch the movie, right? And
Mm-hmm.
for me to try to identify with the male protagonist and his journey and expecting him to have a journey, like that's also part of how I was seeing the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that I was like, oh, okay, like well, the male character is also going to have like I wasn't actively thinking
Sure.
this, but like
I mean,
that's going to be my perspective is the male character is going to also have an arc.
yeah.
And he did have an arc, which was I'm an immature child. I really like this girl, and now I'm starting to do some of these things,
Yeah.
but she also serves an end to me. And to
Mm-hmm.
oh, now I'm back to an immature child.
Well,
Like
yeah,
two different groups.
he,
Yeah.
I think what seems clear about him in retrospect is really just that, like, he could have made it in a different family maybe, but he just ended up being the sort of guy who never learned how to do anything difficult. And so the instant that there's any actual pushback on anything that he does, he just folds because he
Yes.
yeah.
Well, and I feel like the movie played with my perspective, and maybe yours as well, with a lot of the things that happen. So it's like, so after his parents show up to force this divorce, he disappears,
Mhm.
and they go on this hunt for him.
Yeah.
And then you're almost like, what's going to happen once they find him, right?
Mhm.
Like, is he going to then have his realization or whatever? Well, they find him and he's just absolutely hammered, and he's trying to hook up with the Honora's
Diamond.
enemy,
Yeah.
yeah, at the strip club.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, no, no, no. And you're like, don't do that, man. Like, no, like you have this great thing. Like, why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh well, when she shows up, he's gonna like have this realization of like how stupid he was. But no, he doesn't. He's like his first thing is like, oh, are my parents here yet?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's all he's worried about.
Yeah.
And then they go to the courtroom, and it turns out they can't annul the marriage in New York because they didn't get married in New York. And so
Mm-hmm.
now like obstacle, and it's like, oh well, now they've got time to like for him to sober up and like figure it out and like be like, what the hell was I doing, Annie? I love you. But no, then his parents fly them to Vegas to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh well, on the plane flight, but then on the plane flight, like all he does is just like whatever. I don't remember exactly what he does, but it's essentially the equivalent of like zipping his hoodie shut, you
Yeah.
know?
He's just on his phone the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when she first starts to take back even more of her own power in this situation,
Yeah.
right? Because now it's not just so much about like, oh, I've got to find him, we're in love, we have to show him we're in
Mm-hmm.
love, to like, oh no, you are a child. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you can't do this, like, what am I doing here, right? And that's when she gets into like some of that. That's where the Jersey Shore thing like really comes out when she's just like she's berating him on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and it's and then they get to the final piece and it's like, okay, well now they're going to sign it. Well, now he's going to have his realization. He's not going to be able to put pen to paper, but instead, again, just like hoodie on, walks up, says it, like asks her
Mm-hmm.
if she do it, does it, asks his parents like, "Am I all good?" And then like gets back in the car and just
Mm-hmm.
like leaves her gone, done. And they send her back with whatever Yura's character.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, wait, at least I was. I was like, wait, 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 no, wait. When does this come? Like, does he show up later? Like, is this like Pretty Woman style? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I had this realization. This is basically like the the realism version of Pretty Woman. Like how that would really go down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's more likely this scenario happens than Pretty Woman happens.
Yeah.
Because
Um,
Pretty Woman is the Cinderella story, right?
it's interesting just because I think it could be a number of different things that led to us having a slightly different expectation for the story. Partly just because, like I said, like I think, like we probably agree, like the second half of the story when they're coming to the house and he takes off, like at that point it really feels like we've seen a lot of movies. We've been trained by Hollywood over the years to have a lot of sort of like, oh, you can see where the story's going. You can see where the tracks are, which way the story's going to turn. But there's a whole chunk of that movie after that point where you just sort of feel like I have no idea what's going to happen right now. And I think it perhaps um, that uncertainty that could lead to sort of a very like your assumption that it was going to be the story where he does grow out of it and it does get to that the fairy tale ending, whereas I kind of had the impression in my expectation was that this is going to be the story where Honora realizes that's not what's going to happen. And so in a lot of ways your reaction is still Honora's reaction, right? Because you're with her journey on that, hoping that he's going to come around, that we can make this work, that it can still all turn out okay. Um, Only to at the end, the very very end, realize it did actually turn out okay, just a different okay than she thought. Like that, like she's actually, now that she understands more thoroughly who he actually was, she's better rid of him. She has learned a lesson that isn't just like, oh, you shouldn't believe in fairy tales, but that it's important to be able to stand up for yourself, insist on being treated like a person, and there are people who will love you for that, right? And but for me, it was, I didn't have the same expectation that he was going to turn around and figure it all out. I kind of was waiting. As soon as he said we should get married, I was going to like, okay, how's this going to go wrong? That was kind of where I was. But that still didn't mean I knew how it was going to happen.
Right.
Um, but boy, I tell you, that middle set piece where the guys have come to the house, he's taken off. It starts feeling like, is this a kidnapping scenario? Is this a hostage scenario? What's happening here? That whole sequence is just incredible. I just found it enormously entertaining, to the point where some of the stuff that I was writing the week after I saw it included a bit where a young woman had been tied up to stop her from, fighting against being taken prisoner, and someone else was going in to say, "Oh, come on, we don't need to have her feet tied," and the other guard saying, "Do not untie her." Just because we get that in this one, of just the whole bit of like one and then another guy and then a third guy coming in and saying, "What are you doing? Why are you treating her this way?" And them having to just say, "You don't understand. You didn't see." And so, obviously we've talked more about, Mark Edelstein's character of, Vanya, but Yuri Borisov, who is nominated, like, just for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, he is one of the guys who's basically like mob muscle, basically, for the family, who is one of the guys who doesn't even necessarily know everyone involved. He's more like brought in as like an adjunct to, like, hey, we need a guy to come do this, right? And the job is supposed to just be, this stupid kid may have gotten married. We're going to just need to make sure he gets it annulled, and doesn't expect it to result in, a young woman fighting them in her underwear, and then like a manhunt across the city. But he is the guy who, despite being like the mob muscle, is the one who kind of sees pretty quickly, oh no, this poor girl, like, doesn't know that this guy isn't worth it. And
Right.
that's sort of a type that's been in lots of kinds of movies, but it's so like underplayed and yet still reads, and just like him really admiring her, like from the first bit where she punches him in the mouth, and he's kind of like, oh, just looking at her like, wow, wow. How did she do that? And leading to the, all the rest of the stuff. It's great. This is a great movie.
Well, yeah, and so just to kind of close out a loop from earlier,
Mm.
the X thread that was trying to like show how ridiculous it was that Honora won screenplay over A Real Pain
Mm-hmm.
was taking moments from A Real Pain where they're like having this very real, like I said, effusive, like almost like vomiting their feelings dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
and then scenes of from with her and Yura,
Mm-hmm.
which they don't talk that much, right? But they're such, and that's what made me even the more mad about like cherry picking.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, did you even see the movie? Like that's this is not what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody tried to draw in that thread the conclusion, the fact that she said like how lazy was it they used the term like, oh, you have rapey eyes,
Mm-hmm.
or and then like followed it up with like, oh, I think you're a
Yeah,
you know
she
F
does.
word,
Yeah, use the F slur.
F slur, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like how could a movie that uses that slur like
Mm-hmm.
even be nominated? And it's like, all right, now this is like where people start to get critical of like
Hmm.
too much like
Well,
this. Like,
I
'cause
yeah.
yes, it's a terrible slur. We all acknowledge it. That's
Well,
the point of why they're
yeah.
using it
I think
because
in this
yeah,
context, that's a bad faith argument, because the movie
100%.
is not the movie's not on the side of she's right to say that. you know.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's it's within her character.
Hmm.
It's
She's
part
trying
of
to get a rise out of him. That's the whole point of her saying it. She's
yes,
trying to
because
make
he's
him
very
mad.
right, because he's not getting mad.
Hmm.
He's like he's being helpful and it's like awkward to her.
Yeah.
Like the guy who's like tying her up and like
Well,
training her and responsible for her. Yeah.
it's a weird, embarrassing situation where you think you're in the middle of having Cinderella happily ever after, and all of a sudden these guys are at the door. The Prince Charming runs away. They're trying to kidnap you? Question mark. And it's just this guy. And now that things have calmed down a little bit, he's just being really nice about it. It's a weird energy.
Yeah. No, and it all totally works. And that's what
Hmm.
was so frustrating about like those screen caps is it's like
Yeah.
especially when they use like the last scene. Like the last scene is the most powerful scene in the movie. It's one of the best written scenes in the movie. And no, they don't say very much to each other.
Yeah. It's
And
like
that's what makes it good.
I think it is quite possible that like they maybe didn't actually see the movie. They
I
they
would
they
think so
were
too.
they were mad because they wanted a real pain to win and it didn't, so they started to look up the screenplay and they're like, "What? What is this?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, but so that closes that loop. But
Yeah.
the point of it on the positive side is that this movie does a lot of really powerful things with what it doesn't say
Mhm.
in the dialogue.
Yeah.
Like that end scene, like that's that end scene, I give 100% credit for why we thought about this movie for a couple of days because
Mhm.
it the timing of it is awkward, right?
Yeah.
Like it
It's a scene about people in a awkward situation, being a little bit clumsy, not sure what to do, and that's the vibe that it's going for.
clumsy is a great way to put that, right? Because and how the and to Sean Baker's credit, like how he timed that, where it's like it goes on just long enough because like he kind of wants to enjoy it.
Mhm.
It's her default, but like the way it sort of like connects of like to her, well, yeah, he's enjoying it, but like it's not why he did it, right?
Mhm.
He doesn't want the payoff of me giving him a dance or giving him a
Well,
sex,
yeah,
whatever it was.
it's like she's so used to it being a transactional thing. Like he got the ring for her. This is what you do. Men pay her, and she dances on them or
Perform.
has sex with them.
Yeah, performs.
It's
Let's use that.
transactional,
Yeah.
but I think it's clumsy even as it's happening because there's definitely that intimate sense between the two of them that maybe it is actually more than that. Are they actually in love? Well, maybe not, but it's certainly not just a transactional thing. And so it's like I mean, I
It's a
don't
much
know
more
how.
complicated emotion. Like he's
Yeah,
not in love with her and he doesn't expect a
it's
transaction
when
from
he
her.
tries to kiss her, right? That she breaks down. Because I don't know how true that is in real life, but it's certainly a movie trope. Like you mentioned, Pretty Woman, like no kissing on the lips, right? It's because that's the one thing that's not, you got to save the one thing for the guy you actually like.
Right. And but even the way he does it
Hmm.
isn't like I'm in love with you and I'm gonna
Yeah.
kiss you. He's not thinking of it as a transactional thing.
Well,
He's thinking of it as like I like her, she likes
yes.
me.
Yeah. No,
This is what I do
I
next, right?
agree. So I
Yeah.
guess that's what I'm saying is that I think she initiates it because that is kind of her MO. That is the transactional thing. This is what she does. It's like habit. But it isn't just that. And I don't think it's love or even lust between them. It's intimacy. They've
Yes.
been through something where they have an intimate connection that isn't necessarily romantic or sexual, but she is just so used to doing things with this sexual transactional way. And that's kind of not entirely like he's like, well, I maybe would like this, but also that's maybe not what I thought I was going for. And it's a little awkward, and they're both a little awkward until the awkwardness makes it just not going to happen. It's like this is not what is happening, and it becomes the the real emotion, the real intimacy breaks the routine, like the muscle memory of the habitual transaction, right? She
Right.
can't stay in that mode where this is the thing that I do to thank him for doing something nice for me, but sort of piercing that bubble makes all the real emotion come out.
Right. And and what makes the scene even more a little like clumsy and awkward is that normally if you take two, for lack of a better term, like normal individuals who are progressing towards this intimacy and then it breaks down,
Mm-hmm.
there would be a frustration with that on one or the other or both. And yet neither are frustrated,
Mm.
right? They're both content with, like, yeah, we don't need to do this. Let's just leave it.
Mm-hmm.
And it leaves for a very kind of, again, awkward, clumsy end to the movie where basically I don't remember the exact end of the movie, but I think it's like she
Well,
says thank you and he says you're welcome. Like I
well,
think it's like
it's her
basically.
walking
Yeah.
away looking a little bit more self-possessed is kind of the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the last piece of dialogue is like her like just kind of like patting herself up and saying like thank you,
Mm-hmm.
saying you're welcome.
Yeah.
And it being genuine and then being like this is the natural break to where we should be. And this is where it actually should have happened when you gave me the ring is I should have just said thank you, I really appreciate this, and him say you're welcome, you deserve this. you know that's like what the ideal reaction was, not this like, well, I'm going to try to mount you and then you're going to be weird and then we're going to try to kiss me and all this. And so they kind of got to where they needed to be. Like, I don't know, it's just it was it ended so abruptly that it was like that's the end of the movie. And then yet I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And then you what you can't do, or what I couldn't do, was just not stop thinking about how it ended, but like why it ended that way and what that meant for all the things that led up to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I I just keep it. The movie is so funny. like it's incredible drama and really meaningful weight to all these characters and their feelings, but there's also just so much that's just really laugh out loud funny. Like, and even just like little grace notes of things, like the older the guy, the priest getting the cell phone and trying to read his text messages while he's doing a baptism.
Yes.
It's like he's trying to do a baptism, but he's getting texts just like, "What? Shoot, she really got married? Oh."
Hi. Hi, buddy.
Yeah. So in any case, what a great movie. I think it was a category this year that had a lot of great movies in it. Um, Challengers should have been in there. People should watch Challengers. I'm going to stop saying that now, though, because Honora won. It's a good movie. It won. So now our task is to decide what do we want to do next. So, in our initial little bit of pre-discussion, it sounded like we were maybe both in the mood for something a little lighter. I had tossed off perhaps the Monty Python movies, but you suggested maybe not quite that silly. Do we want to try to theme something? You mentioned the Karate Kid. Do we want to theme something around that one, or just like 80s fun movies?
That was kind of more where I was going. Like I already rewatched the context is I rewatched the Karate Kid after finishing Cobra Kai.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it made the end of Cobra Kai even better, um, because of how well it tracks like to the Karate Kid.
Sure.
But it was fun revisiting something from my childhood that I really enjoyed, And that's more what I was looking for because
Mm-hmm.
I think if anybody hasn't either picked up on this or listened to us for a while, like I'm like 10 weeks from having my first
You
child.
you actually did say that already in this very
I know I
recording.
said it in here,
Yeah.
but if it didn't quite click,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Like my first child's here in 10 weeks. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
going to outside I called it what I think is going to be the second most stressful part of pregnancy, which I haven't lived through it yet, but I still think like the initial part when you first find out and you can't tell anybody and it's still a risk and you're like going through that like excitement of this is happening versus like, hey, it's still so early, it might not quite come true. Like that feels like will always be the most stressful.
Mm-hmm.
But I know this part is going to be, if not trump that, it will be the most stressful because it's like at some point, like I'm going to have to drive to the hospital, and then a human being that completely relies on me is going to be here.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so it's it's kind of an interesting time. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm excited, but more terrified every day that goes by.
So is it more that you're in the mood for a certain kind of light vibe, or more specifically things that you sort of fondly remember through, you know, nostalgia, or just
I
stuff
kind
you
of
liked
like
as a
that
kid?
because it's like it's even it's has a light vibe, but there's like if it's something I fondly remember, there's an easy accessibility to it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
so it's not like I'm not going into something new or something I haven't seen before. Like it's something that like I already know, and so like my sort of default mechanism is going to be like there's going to be an anticipation of like joy
Mm-hmm.
that comes before I watch it, right? Like so there's like a more transcendent like just happiness that comes over like doing this. I
Mm-hmm.
know that's where I'm at, you know. And
Sure.
that's where Cobra Kai really delivered and then Karate Kid following up on it really did as well. So
Mm-hmm.
um
Uh,
trying to
I
think
was
other
trying to think of like movies that feel like they live in my brain from that time period where I was like 10 to 12, and some movie that just really made me happy, right? Back to the Future is one that came to mind, although we have done that already when we did a Robert Zemeckis. But I
yep,
also thought
that's the
about
kind of movie. Yeah.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was one, that kind of in that Ferris Bueller's Day Off. We did a John Hughes episode, but not that movie.
Starting to get there. Yeah. Those are the kinds of things like movies that we would have watched over and over and over again on
Mm-hmm.
TV or whatever when we were kids and be like, "Oh, I'll watch that again."
Mm-hmm.
Um,
The Goonies we did already.
yep,
That was
that was
another one of those for me.
let's think. I kind of like Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Um, did we do the Blues Brothers? That's another one of those for me for sure.
Yeah, but you already got Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Fair
Can't.
enough. I mean, I'm just trying to toss ones out because you haven't named any yet.
I know. I'm wasn't quite prepared for this. Ooh, I could even go to some of like the early rom-coms.
I was
Like
thinking also like Disney animation, because we were kind of right in the prime for that, that golden age, Renaissance, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King,
yeah. Have
Aladdin.
we done Princess Bride?
I don't think we have. That's another good one for sure. Nope, we have not done The Princess Bride.
Um, Die Hard, I've watched plenty of times, but that's
Also we have done Die Hard.
I haven't done that. Clueless, it's a good one.
Mm.
Early
Clueless we
rom.
did, also, didn't we? Yeah, I think we did.
Did we?
Clueless. Oh, maybe not. I'm not seeing it on the list. I feel like we've definitely talked about maybe doing it. It has definitely come up in discussion before, but I don't see
Yeah,
it on the list.
like when I think about like those early rom-coms, like
Mm.
Clueless and Things I Hate About You,
Mm-hmm.
She's All That,
Yeah.
uh, those are fun. Princess Bride is fun. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a rom-com. So, how many are we picking?
Well, I think we could probably keep it simple with just two, unless we have a third one that we feel bad about leaving out.
Let's go with Princess Bride, and if you're comfortable with Ferris Bueller, but you can make a different selection, I'm going to go with Princess Bride.
All right. Hmm. My dilemma is between Ferris Bueller or the Blues Brothers. I think.
I vote Ferris Bueller if we're
Okay.
doing Bride. I just feel like it.
I
Not
it
that,
does it fits the theme a little better. Yeah.
yeah, I think the Blues Brothers is a good one to have on the docket, but I
Sure.
think for this one that works better.
Only complicating thing for Blues Brothers is just the meta of it being directed by John Landis. But John
I
Landis notoriously got people killed on the film set of the Twilight Zone movie.
oh
Yeah, basically reckless disregard for the safety, and it ended up killing Vic Morrow, the actor, and two kids during that filming of that sequence.
I did not
Yeah,
even know that.
he went to prison.
Did not know.
Yeah, but in any case, though, Blues Brothers is great. But yes, let's do the Princess Bride and Ferris Bueller's Day Off comfort food for our age bracket.
Yes.
All right, so I think then we've got our homework for this next go, and we'll be back to talk about more movies. So in the meantime, watch good movies.
Watch good movies.